I was born with the kind of body that demands attention, between the natural curves and my preference for tailored, form-fitting silhouettes. The internet had affectionately labeled me the Ice Queen Mother. Whenever I went out with my roommate, she'd joke that we looked like a stepmother, taking her middle schooler for a walk. Even the stray dogs on campus seemed to stop and stare. For a little too long. Before we ever met in person, the guy I was seeing online sent me a photo. My roommate Gwen recognized him instantly. She let out a piercing scream. "Shut up, Jenny. Your mystery man is Hudson Christian. His dad is literally on the board of trustees. He's the golden boy of the university. But there's a catch. He's got this childhood friend, Daisy Vance, who's obsessed with playing the eternal toddler." Before I could even ask for details, Gwen had the student forms pulled up, giving me the full dossier on Daisy. "Look at this, Jenny. Daisy is a piece of work. She's built her whole personality around being tiny and innocent. People call her the weaponized toddler. If you two cross paths, it's going to be a clash of the titans, the ultimate femme fatale versus the world's oldest baby. I'd pay for front row seat to that." I ran a hand through my long, dark waves, admiring my fresh manicure with a practiced indifference. "Let her play house," I said, my voice smooth. "Tomorrow, when we meet, I'll make sure she understands one thing. In the face of real femininity, cute is just a consolation prize." To be honest, I have zero interest in girl hate. And I wasn't exactly looking for love. But Hudson Christian was obscenely wealthy. We've been dating online for a week without meeting. And he'd already gifted me $10,000 voluntarily. I was planning to go to Caltech for my PhD, and I was frantically saving for tuition. Hudson wasn't just a boyfriend. He was a bridge to my future. The secret to maximizing your take in a relationship like this: never be the one at fault. With a baby-brained childhood friend in the mix, walking away with a cool million seems less like a dream, and more like a business plan. We agreed to meet at 2 revolutions per minute in the university hall. I happened to have an award to pick up there anyway. A minor crisis in the lab held me up, and by the time I pushed through the heavy oak doors, I was 20 minutes late. I could hear voices drifting from the back of the hall. "Hudson, where is she? Maybe she's too scared to show up." The voice was high-pitched, syrupy, and cloyingly sweet. Every sentence ended with a little upward lilt, like a question from a toddler. That had to be Daisy. Maybe she's a 300-pound catfish who's just a pro at Photoshop. Another male voice chimed in, snickering. "Stop it." Hudson's voice was low, resonant, but carried a hint of hesitation. "I've heard her voice. She sounds sophisticated." Daisy let out a soft huff. "Voices can be faked, Hudson. There are so many girls online who use filters and voice changers. I'm just worried you're being scammed. I just want to protect you." "Exactly, man. You've got to be careful these days." I chose that moment to push the door wide. Sunlight flooded in behind me, silhouetting my figure against the bright afternoon. I was wearing a charcoal gray, bandaged dress that hit just above the knee, the neckline framing my collarbones perfectly. My hair fell in heavy waves over one shoulder, and my pearl earrings caught the light. As I moved, the hall went silent. A guy who had been mid-sip of his water choked, coughing violently. I scanned the room, my gaze landing on Hudson in the back row. He was even better looking than his photos. High brow bones, a sharp jawline, and an air of cool detachment. Right now, though, that detachment was gone. He was staring at me, his thumb frozen over his phone screen. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. I walked toward them, the rhythmic click of my heels echoing in the cavernous room. I took my time. "So sorry I'm late," I said, stopping in front of Hudson and leaning in slightly lab emergency. He looked up at me, his voice a bit raspy. "You're Jenny in the flesh." I gave him a slow, knowing smile.
"What? Hi.
Are you disappointed I'm not a 300-pound catfish?" The tips of Hudson's ears turned a vivid shade of red. A guy with glasses nearby theatrically clutched his chest. "Holy hell. Nice to meet you.
Sister-in-law."
I'm Mike. I wasn't the one who said catfish. It was this idiot. He pointed shamelessly at the guy next to him, who looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. I laughed, and the tension in the room broke. "Isn't that dress a little much for campus?" Acey's voice cut through the air. Sharp and brittle, she was practically glued to Hudson's side, clutching his sleeve like a security blanket. I took her in pigtails, a Peter Pan collar, a pink bow, and a quilted purse. Wow, she really was leaning into the precious moments aesthetic.
"Is it?"
I sat down across from them, my movements deliberate and graceful. I looked her in the eye, my voice dripping with faux kindness. "Sweetie, when you have a woman's body, everything looks much, but I actually love your look. It's so retro." I paused, my eyes traveling from her pigtails down to her Mary Janes, then back up to her flat chest. "It's a shame. Really. Only a girl with a flat, childlike frame can pull off those doll dresses." On a woman like me, the buttons would probably become shrapnel. Daisy's face went from pale to beet red in 3 seconds. "Who are you calling flat?" she shrieked, her baby voice cracking into something much shriller. I widened my eyes, pulling a face more innocent than hers could ever be. "Oh, honey, I was just stating a fact. You aren't upset, are you? I forgot how sensitive children can be."
You.
Daisy looked like she was about to have a full-blown tantrum. Daisy Hudson interrupted, his brow furrowed. He gently pulled his sleeve out of her grip.
Sit down.
"Don't make a scene." Daisy looked at him in total betrayal, her eyes instantly welling with tears. "Hudson, you're taking her side. She just insulted me." "I didn't insult you," I said softly, my tone incredibly sincere. "I was calling you cute. Grown women envy that kind of youthfulness. Daisy, we can't all be babies forever." Daisy's lip trembled. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "So you have a chest? Big deal. Big boobs, no brains." Before I could respond, the hall's PA system crackled to life with a burst of static. Then a booming male voice filled the room. "And now please, join me in welcoming our top honor recipient for the National Life Sciences Competition, Jenny Young, to the stage." The room erupted in applause. Daisy's words died in the air, making her look utterly ridiculous. She stood there with her mouth open, unable to find a comeback. Since gaze stayed on me, and this time there was something more than just physical attraction. In his eyes, there was genuine intrigue. I looked up at the stage and saw Richard Christian, Hudson's father, holding a gold-embossed certificate and a medal. He was scanning the crowd. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked to the stage. Under the gaze of 300 people that night, Hudson wired $20,000 to my account as a congratulatory gift. Just as I was starting to think this would be easy, my advisor called. Her tone was grim. She told me to get to the department office immediately. There are 5 people waiting for me, all looking like they were at a funeral. The head of the ethics committee pushed a stack of papers toward me. "Jenny, we've received an anonymous tip accusing you of academic fraud. These are screenshots of your alleged chat logs." I flipped through them. It was a fake account using my photo and name, chatting with someone labeled SA Ghostwriter. The messages were blunt. Payment details, prompts, deadlines. The tone was a decent imitation of mine.
"This isn't my account," I said,
sliding the papers back. "The whistleblower provided a photo of your student ID as proof of identity. My ID went missing last week. Committee had adjusted his glasses. We have to investigate. Until then, your fellowship and prize money are suspended." I didn't argue. The money wasn't the point. A fraud charge would kill my chances at Caltech. I picked up the chat logs again and turned to the 3rd page. "Professor, look at the time stamp on this message. 12 p.m. last Tuesday. And at 3:10 p.m. I was on stage in the University Hall, receiving an award from Richard Christian. There were 300 witnesses and a live stream. I wasn't in the back of the room, hiring a ghostwriter." The professor's expression shifted. I tapped the ghostwriter's profile picture in the screenshot. "And this account. They posted a selfie last night with a location tag at the South dorms. If you look at the reflection in the mirror behind them, you can clearly see a girl with pigtails and a pink bow." I turned my phone around to show them a photo of Daisy from the forum. Should I call Daisy Vance in here to clarify? Or should we just go straight to the dean? The office went silent. The professor took off his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Jenny, we will handle this with the utmost seriousness." I stood up, my voice cold. "I expect a formal apology, and I'll be pursuing a defamation claim." The moment I stepped out of the office, a text from Hudson popped up. "How much will it take for you to drop this?" I looked up and saw Hudson leaning against the wall at the end of the corridor. He looked uncharacteristically uncomfortable. "Jenny, can we talk?" He sounded hesitant. "Look, our families have been close forever. Our fathers are business partners. Daisy, she's been spoiled her whole life. She has a temper, but she isn't a bad person. She's just immature. Could you just let this one go for me?" He said it softly, his voice like a caress, smiled. "Sure, Hudson, if it's that important to you." He visibly relaxed. 5 minutes later, another $100,000 hit my account. I stared at the zeros, and my anger evaporated instantly. Let it go for $100,000. I let her set my car on fire. But Daisy wasn't done. That afternoon, I returned to my dorm to find my desk stripped bare. My 3 thick research journals, the culmination of months of lab work, were gone. Where are my notes?" I asked Gwen. Gwen looked sick, as she pointed toward the trash chute at the end of the hall. I walked over. My journals had been ripped to shreds, soaked in leftover ramen soup and coffee grounds, with a muddy footprint stamped on the cover. I tried to stop her, Gwen whispered, but Daisy said she was helping you clean and thought it was just scrap paper. When I told her it wasn't, she started crying, saying she was just trying to be a good girl, and ran off. I stared at the trash for a long time. Those notes contained 3 months of raw experimental data. My midterm defense was next week. Without that data, my thesis was dead. I took a photo and sent it to Hudson. No text, no accusations. Just the image. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Bank notification. $20,000 memo. Don't be mad. Buy something nice. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then took my phone away and headed to the campus print shop. I pulled up my cloud drive and hit print on a fresh set of data. Gwen stared at me, jaw dropped. When did you scan those? The first day I started in the lab, I said, watching the printer whir to life. Anyone in research who doesn't have a backup is asking for a disaster. Gwen was silent for a moment. Jenny, you're so cold. It's almost scary. Scary? I repeated, loading the freshly printed pages into a clean leather binder. No, Gwen. What's scary is relying on the charity of a system that would throw you under the bus the moment a donor's child cries. This is just risk management. Gwen shook her head, though there was a look of profound respect in her eyes. Well, your risk management just bought you a decent down payment on a house. Are you actually going to keep dating Hudson after this? Dating is a strong word, I said, snapping the binder shut. We are engaging in a mutually beneficial exchange. He gets the prestige of walking around with the Ice Queen Mother on his arm, and I get a fully funded research career. But if Daisy keeps escalating, the price of my companionship is going to go up. And escalate she did. The next evening, Hudson insisted on taking me to the Gilded Oak, an exclusive, reservation-only restaurant on the edge of the city where the local elite gathered to strike deals and ignore their children. It was the kind of place where the menus didn't have prices, and the lighting was kept dim enough to hide plastic surgery scars. Hudson was already seated when I arrived. He stood up immediately, his eyes tracking the movement of my black silk wrap dress. It was conservative enough to pass muster with his father's associates, yet tailored to highlight every curve he had paid so handsomely to admire. Jenny, he said, pulling out my chair. You look incredible. I can't apologize enough for what happened with your journals. I had no idea Daisy would go that far. It's fine, Hudson, I said, keeping my tone soft, tinged with just a hint of brave resignation. The data is gone, of course, but I'll just have to pull a few all-nighters to reconstruct what I can. Science is about resilience, after all. Hudson's face twisted with guilt. I spoke to her father. He was furious with her. But Daisy, she's always had these emotional outbursts. She doesn't understand the real-world consequences of her actions. Clearly, I murmured, unfolding my linen napkin. But at some point, immature becomes malicious. I can handle a few insults about my appearance, Hudson. But my work, that is my future. I know. And I promise you, I won't let her interfere again. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I want to support you, Jenny. Not just financially, but in every way. Before I could offer a suitably demure response, the heavy velvet curtains at the entrance of the dining room parted. A high-pitched, breathless voice drifted across the quiet room. Hudson? Oh my gosh, what a coincidence. I didn't even need to look up to know who it was. Daisy stood there, wearing a pastel yellow pinafore dress over a white ruffled blouse. She had a giant matching bow at her hair, and she was clutching a plush rabbit keychain on her purse, as if her life depended on it. Behind her stood 2 of her usual sycophants, girls from her sorority who looked like they had been dressed by the same toddler-chic stylist. Hudson's grip on my hand tightened, his shoulders tensing instantly. Daisy, what are you doing here? My parents gave me their card for a girls' night, Daisy squeaked, bouncing on the balls of her feet. She trotted over to our table, completely ignoring the hostess who was trying to guide her back. I had no idea you'd be here. Oh, and you brought Jenny. She pronounced my name as if it were a brand of generic laundry detergent. Daisy, we're in the middle of a private dinner, Hudson said, his voice dropping into a warning register. Oh, don't be like that, Huddy. Daisy pouted, her lower lip protruding in a practiced display of childish innocence. We can just join you. There's plenty of room. Right, Jenny? You don't mind sharing, do you? Or is this one of those grown-up dinners where you talk about things I'm too little to understand? Her friends giggled behind their hands. I took a slow sip of my water, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone at the table uncomfortable. Then I looked up, offering her a calm, clinical smile. Actually, Daisy, we were just discussing my research, I said, my voice smooth and perfectly modulated. The data that was unfortunately destroyed yesterday. The police were quite interested in the campus security footage from the hallway near the trash chute. Apparently, destroying academic property valued over a certain threshold is considered grand larceny. Daisy's pout froze. The color began to drain from her cheeks, leaving her blush looking like 2 artificial pink circles. Larceny, she stammered, her baby voice wavering. That's silly. It was just scrap paper. I was helping. Of course you were, I replied, leaning back in my chair. And I'm sure the district attorney will find your desire to help very endearing. Though I must ask, does your father's insurance cover civil lawsuits for intellectual property damage? Because my advisor estimated the value of those 3 months of proprietary lab data at roughly $80,000. Daisy turned to Hudson, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Hudson, tell her she's being mean. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to be clean. You know how I get when things are messy. Daisy, stop, Hudson said, his voice cold. He didn't look at her, his eyes were fixed on his plate. You shouldn't have been in her dorm. You shouldn't have touched her things. Go sit with your friends at another table. But Hudson. Now, Daisy, he added, his tone brook no argument. Daisy let out a sharp, choked sob, stomping her Mary Jane-clad foot against the hardwood floor before spinning on her heel and fleeing toward the restrooms. Her friends scurried after her like frightened mice. Hudson let out a long, exhausted sigh, rubbing his temples. I'm so sorry, Jenny. It's fine, Hudson, I said, reaching out to pat his hand reassuringly. But as you can see, she's not going to stop. For both of our sakes, I think we need to establish some boundaries. What do you suggest? He asked, looking at me as if I held the answers to the universe. Let me handle my midterm defense next week without any distractions, I said. And perhaps a small token of your commitment to my peace of mind, to ensure that your family's connection to her doesn't compromise my academic standing. Of course, Hudson said quickly, already reaching for his phone under the table. Whatever you need. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Bank notification. Incoming transfer of $50,000. Memo. Compensation. I smiled, the candlelight catching the edge of my manicured nails. Thank you, Hudson. You're always so understanding. The midterm defense was held in the departmental amphitheater. It was a high-stakes event. Failure meant losing your funding and being relegated to the bottom of the lab hierarchy. For me, it was simply the final hurdle before Caltech. I stood at the podium, my presentation projected onto the massive screen behind me. I was wearing a tailored navy blue pantsuit, professional, sharp, and commanding. The panel of 5 professors sat in the front row. Among them was Dr. Aris, a senior faculty member known for his close ties to the Vance family. Daisy's father had funded Dr. Aris's latest textbook, a detail Gwen had unearthed for me the night before. And that concludes the synthesis of the lipid nanoparticles, I said, clicking to the final slide. I am now open to questions. The department head, Dr. Vance, no relation to Daisy, thankfully, nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Miss Young. The data is robust and your methodology is pristine. Before the other professors could chime in, Dr. Aris cleared his throat loudly. He adjusted his gold-rimmed spectacles and looked down his nose at me. While the presentation is indeed polished, Dr. Aris said, his voice dripping with skepticism, I have some concerns regarding the integrity of the raw data. There were rumors earlier this week of academic misconduct. A ghostwriter, if I recall. The room went quiet. I could see Gwen sitting in the back row, her hands clenching the armrests of her chair. Those rumors were thoroughly investigated by the ethics committee, Dr. Aris. I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of defensive panic. The allegations were found to be entirely fraudulent, stemming from a malicious impersonation attempt. The committee has already issued a formal apology to me. Be that as it may, Dr. Aris pressed, leaning forward. We only have your printed slides today. I understand your original lab journals were lost? A rather convenient accident for someone trying to hide discrepancies in their raw data, wouldn't you say? I looked at Dr. Aris. I could see the subtle smirk on his face, the smug satisfaction of a man who thought he had backed a student into a corner. He was doing Daisy's dirty work, trying to cast a permanent shadow of doubt over my academic career. The physical journals were indeed destroyed, I said, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the amphitheater. However, as any competent researcher knows, physical media is merely a secondary backup. If the panel would direct their attention to the screen. I clicked my remote. The slide changed to show a live feed of the university's main spectrometer database. These are the raw, untampered system logs directly from the lab's central server, I explained, pointing to the cryptographic timestamps. Each data point was uploaded automatically at the exact moment of creation. These logs are encrypted and managed by the university's IT department. Unless Dr. Aris is suggesting I managed to hack into the school's mainframe to falsify 3 months of real-time thermodynamic data, the integrity of this research is absolute. Dr. Aris's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Furthermore, I continued, my smile turning razor-sharp, I have already submitted these verified logs to the Caltech Admissions Board as part of my preliminary application. They were highly impressed by the transparency of our department's digital tracking system. The department head let out a hearty laugh. Splendid. Practical, modern, and completely bulletproof. Excellent job, Jenny. If there are no further, and I do mean relevant questions, we will conclude this defense. Dr. Eris slumped back in his chair, his face a pale shade of gray. As the panel stood up to offer their congratulations, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Hudson. "My dad wants to invite you to the university gala this Friday. He was highly impressed by your defense report. Please say yes." I replied with a single, elegant sentence. I would be honored. The university gala was the premier social event of the academic year. Held in the grand ballroom of the historic campus hall, it was where the university's largest donors, trustees, and administrative heads gathered to flaunt their wealth under the guise of supporting higher education. I spent Thursday afternoon at a high-end boutique downtown, using a small fraction of my peace of mind funds to purchase a dress that was nothing short of a weapon. It was an emerald green silk gown, backless, with a high slit that showed off my legs without crossing into vulgarity. It was sophisticated, mature, and utterly dominant. When Hudson picked me up, he looked as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "Jenny," he managed to say, his eyes scanning my figure. You're going to turn every head in that room." "That's the plan, Hudson," I said, slipping my arm through his. "After all, I am representing your family tonight." The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos, glittering diamonds, and champagne flutes. The moment we walked in, a hush seemed to ripple through the crowd near the entrance. I ignored the whispers, keeping my posture regal and my expression one of polite, cool indifference. Hudson, Jenny, Richard Christian, Hudson's father, walked toward us. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and the sharp, calculating eyes of a veteran venture capitalist. Beside him was his wife, Eleanor, a woman who looked as though she had been preserved in ice and diamonds. "Father, mother," Hudson said, nodding respectfully. "You remember Jenny?" "Of course," Richard said, offering me a firm, genuine handshake. "The star of the life sciences department. Your presentation on lipid nanoparticles has been the talk of the board of trustees all week. Remarkable work, young lady." "Thank you, Mr. Christian," I said, my voice smooth and deferential. "The university's state-of-the-art facilities made the research possible. I'm incredibly grateful for the support the board provides." Eleanor Christian eyed me up and down, her gaze lingering on my emerald dress. "A very bold choice of color, Jenny, but you carry it well. It's refreshing to see a young woman who knows how to present herself with some dignity." "Thank you, Mrs. Christian," I replied. "I believe that professionalism should extend to every aspect of one's life, including how we present ourselves to the world." Before Eleanor could respond, a high-pitched giggle shattered the elegant atmosphere. "Uncle Richard, Auntie Eleanor." Daisy virtually bounced into our circle. She was wearing a voluminous, baby blue ball gown with so many layers of tulle, she looked like a walking loofah. She had a massive white satin bow perched precariously on her head, and her makeup was done in a way that made her eyes look unnaturally large and watery. "Daisy," Richard said, his tone polite but notably cooler than it had been with me. "I didn't know your parents were attending tonight. They couldn't make it, so they let me come with my cousins." Daisy squeaked, immediately grabbing Hudson's free arm. "Huddy, you look so handsome." "Doesn't he look handsome, Auntie Eleanor?" Hudson immediately pulled his arm away, his expression hardening. "Daisy, please. We are speaking with my parents and Jenny." Daisy's eyes welled with tears in an instant. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just got so excited to see you. You've been so busy lately, and you haven't been answering my texts." She looked at me, her lower lip trembling. "Is it because of her? Did she tell you not to talk to me anymore?" Several nearby guests paused, their heads turning toward our group. "Daisy, don't be ridiculous," Hudson muttered, his face turning red. "I'm not being ridiculous." Daisy sobbed softly, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "I know I'm just a silly girl, but I thought we were friends, Hudson. Ever since we were little, we always went to these galas together. Now you won't even look at me." Mrs. Christian frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the public display. "Daisy, dear, this is not the place for a scene." I decided it was time to step in. "Daisy," I said, my voice dripping with motherly concern as I stepped closer to her. "We understand you're feeling left behind. It must be very difficult watching your childhood friends grow up and move on to adult relationships while you're still finding yourself." Daisy glared at me through her tears, her baby persona slipping for a split second to reveal a flash of pure hatred. "I don't need to find myself, Jenny. I know exactly who I am." "Of course you do, sweetie," I said, reaching out to gently adjust the massive bow on her head, treating her like a disheveled toddler in public. "And we all think your little dress is just adorable. It takes a lot of courage to wear something so youthful to a black tie event. It really highlights your unique charm." A few of the older matrons nearby stifled amusement behind their champagne glasses. Daisy's outfit, which might have been tolerated at a backyard birthday party, looked utterly ridiculous next to the high society sophistication of the gala. Daisy's face went from pale to a deep, furious crimson. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" Just because you got some stupid award. You're nothing but, Daisy. Richard Christian's voice was like a whip crack. That is enough. Your behavior tonight is unacceptable. If you cannot conduct yourself like an adult, I will have security escort you to a cab. Daisy gasped, looking at Richard in utter shock. Her eyes darted to Hudson, but he refused to look at her, his attention entirely focused on me. Realizing she had lost this round entirely, Daisy let out a dramatic shriek, threw her hands over her face, and ran out of the ballroom, her tulle skirt rustling loudly behind her. Richard shook his head, looking thoroughly annoyed. My apologies, Jenny. The Vance family has coddled that girl to the point of absurdity. I hope she didn't ruin your evening. Not at all, Mr. Christian, I said, offering him a warm, gracious smile. I only hope she finds some peace. It must be exhausting trying to stay young forever. Eleanor Christian let out a soft, rare chuckle. Indeed. Now, Jenny, let me introduce you to the Dean of the Science Department. He's been very eager to meet you. As we walked away, Hudson leaned in close to my ear. Thank you for handling that so gracefully. You were perfect. I do my best, Hudson, I whispered back.
My phone buzzed again.
Bank notification. Incoming transfer of $30,000. Memo. Thank you. I smiled. The gala was turning out to be a very profitable venture. The next morning, the high of the gala was replaced by a cold, calculating reality. I was sitting in my dorm room, reviewing my bank account. With the latest transfers from Hudson, I now had over $230,000 in my savings. It was more than enough to cover my tuition at Caltech, my living expenses, and even fund some of my initial independent research projects. But I knew Daisy wouldn't let things go. A girl who had built her entire existence on being the coddled center of attention would not go quietly into the night after being publicly humiliated in front of the university's elite. My suspicion was confirmed when Gwen burst into the room, holding a delicate, pastel pink gift box tied with a silk ribbon. Jenny, this was left at the front desk for you, Gwen said, her face pale. It has your name on it in very neat, curly handwriting. I didn't want to open it, but look. Attached to the ribbon was a small card. To Jenny, with my deepest apologies for my behavior at the gala. Let's start over.
Daisy.
Don't touch it, I said, standing up. It's a trap.
What do you think is in there? A bomb.
Gwen whispered, eyes wide. No, Daisy isn't a terrorist. She's a malicious child. Her weapons are social and academic. I pulled on a pair of latex lab gloves from my desk drawer and carefully snipped the ribbon. Inside the box was a stunning, vintage diamond bracelet. It was a delicate platinum chain set with dozens of sparkling, high-clarity diamonds. It looked incredibly expensive, easily worth $50,000. Oh my God, Gwen gasped. Did she actually buy you a peace offering? No, I said, picking up the bracelet with a pair of tweezers. Look at the clasp. There's a small inscription. EC. Gwen frowned.
EC? Who is O?
Eleanor Christian. Exactly, I said, my voice dropping into a cold, dangerous register. This is Eleanor Christian's personal bracelet. She was wearing it at the gala last night. Daisy must have stolen it, or taken it when Eleanor took it off in the powder room, and now she's planted it in my room. If she calls the campus police to report a theft. Gwen's voice trembled. Then they search my room, find the bracelet, and I'm arrested for grand theft. My Caltech admission is revoked, my reputation is ruined, and the Christian family is forced to cut ties with me to avoid a scandal. It's a perfect plan. If I were stupid enough to keep it, what are we going to do? Gwen asked, panic rising in her voice. We have to get rid of it. Throw it in the river. No, I said, a slow, dark smile spreading across my face. That would be a waste of a perfectly good opportunity. If Daisy wants to play games with high society heirlooms, we should let her experience the full consequences of her playhouse. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Hudson? Hi, sweetie. Yes, I'm doing well. Listen, I need to ask you a quick question. Did your mother happen to lose a diamond bracelet last night? Yes, the platinum one with her initials. Oh, she's frantic about it? She thinks she lost it in the ballroom? I let out a soft, theatrical sigh of relief. Thank goodness. I actually found it in my clutch this morning. I must have picked it up by mistake when I was helping her with her code in the cloakroom. Yes, I was so worried. I want to return it immediately. But I have a lab session right now. Could you meet me at the campus coffee shop in 20 minutes? I'll bring it to you. Of course, Jenny, Hudson said, his voice filled with relief. Thank you so much. My mother was devastated. I'll see you in 20 minutes. I hung up the phone and looked at Gwen. Now, we make a quick detour, I said. 20 minutes later, I walked into the campus coffee shop. It was bustling with students, but I spotted Hudson immediately, sitting at a corner table. As I walked toward him, I noticed a familiar figure sitting 3 tables away, pretending to read a textbook while wearing a pair of oversized sunglasses. Daisy. She was waiting for the show, expecting the campus police, whom she had undoubtedly tipped off, to arrive and find the stolen bracelet in my possession. I smiled to myself. She really was amateur. Hudson, I said, sitting down opposite him. I placed my leather handbag on the table. Jenny, thank you, Hudson said, leaning forward. My mother's been crying all morning. That bracelet was an anniversary gift from my father. I'm just glad I found it, I said, reaching into my bag. But instead of pulling out the bracelet, I pulled out a small, transparent evidence bag containing the pink gift box and the card from Daisy. What's this? Hudson asked, his brow furrowing. This is how I found it, Hudson, I said, my voice quiet, trembling slightly as if I were holding back tears. It was delivered to my room this morning, with this card. I slid the card across the table. Hudson picked it up, his eyes scanning Daisy's curly handwriting. His face went entirely pale. Daisy sent this to you, he whispered. Yes, I said, letting a single tear slip down my cheek. She sent your mother's stolen bracelet to my dorm room, under the guise of an apology. If I hadn't realized what it was, if I hadn't called you, what would have happened, Hudson? The police would have found it in my room. I would have been accused of stealing from your mother. Hudson's hands began to shake. She tried to frame you for grand theft. She didn't just try to frame me, Hudson, I whispered, leaning in. She tried to ruin my life. She wanted me in prison. Right on cue, 2 campus security officers walked into the coffee shop, scanning the crowd. Daisy stood up from her table, pointing a shaking finger in our direction. Officers, Daisy squeaked, her voice echoing in a quiet coffee shop. That's her. That's the girl who stole Mrs. Christian's bracelet. I saw her slide it into her bag last night, and she has it in her purse right now. The officers walked over to our table, looking uncomfortable. Excuse me, miss. We received an anonymous tip regarding a stolen item. The item is here, officers, Hudson interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold register as he stood up. Daisy smirked, her eyes gleaming with triumph. See? I told you. She's a thief. But it wasn't stolen by Jenny, Hudson continued, turning to look at Daisy with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. It was stolen by Daisy Vance. She sent it to Jenny's dorm room in this box, with this signed card, attempting to frame her. I have the evidence right here. He handed the transparent bag containing the pink box, the card, and the bracelet to the officers. Daisy's smirk vanished. Her face went entirely white, then a sickly shade of green. What?
No.
Hudson, that's not. She's lying. She put it in there. She wrote the card. That is my mother's handwriting on the box's shipping label from the boutique, but the card is in your handwriting, Daisy, Hudson said, his voice flat. And my father is on the board of trustees. Do you think the university will overlook a student framing another student for grand larceny? Especially when the victim is the recipient of the National Life Sciences competition. The security officers looked at each other, then at Daisy. Miss Vance, we're going to need you to come with us to the dean's office immediately. Your parents and the Christian family will be contacted.
No.
Hudson, help me. It was just a joke. I was just playing. Daisy shrieked, her baby voice completely breaking into a frantic, ugly scream as the officers escorted her out of the coffee shop. The entire room watched in silence as the weaponized toddler was finally dragged away, kicking and screaming like the child she pretended to be. The fallout was swift and absolute. Richard and Eleanor Christian were furious. The attempt to frame me using Eleanor's personal jewelry was an insult to their family name that they could not ignore. The Vance family, desperate to avoid a public trial and a massive lawsuit that would ruin their social standing, begged for a private settlement. The meeting was held in the university's main administrative boardroom. Richard Christian sat at the head of the table, flanked by his lawyers. I sat next to Hudson, looking composed, elegant, and entirely at peace. Daisy and her parents sat across from us. Daisy looked utterly defeated, her pigtails gone, her head bowed, and her eyes red from crying. Her father, a wealthy but weak-looking man, looked as if he had aged 10 years in 3 days. We are prepared to offer a full, public retraction of any academic allegations, the Vance family lawyer said, sliding a document across the table. And a formal, written apology to Miss Young. In exchange, we ask that Miss Young drop all civil and criminal charges of defamation and grand theft conspiracy. I didn't touch the paper. I looked at the lawyer, then at Daisy's father. An apology doesn't pay for the emotional distress, the potential damage to my academic reputation, or the risk to my Caltech fellowship, I said, my voice smooth and unyielding. What do you want, Miss Young? Mr. Vance asked, his voice hollow. $1 million, I said flatly. Paid directly into my trust account. And Daisy Vance will voluntarily withdraw from this university immediately, with a permanent ban from entering campus grounds. Mr. Vance gasped. 1 million? That is extortion. No, Mr. Vance. Richard Christian chimed in, his voice cold. That is a bargain. If this goes to a public trial, the Christian family will throw its full weight behind Jenny. Your daughter will go to prison, your family name will be dragged through the mud, and your stock prices will plummet. $1 million is a very small price to pay for your family's survival. The room went silent. Mr. Vance looked at his daughter, who let out a small, pitiful whimper. With a shaking hand, Mr. Vance took his pen and signed the settlement agreement. 2 weeks later, the campus was quiet. The autumn leaves were falling, and the air was crisp. I stood in front of my dorm building, my suitcases packed and loaded into the back of a luxury SUV. Gwen was standing beside me, tears in her eyes. I can't believe you're actually leaving for Caltech early, she said, hugging me tightly. What am I going to do without the Ice Queen Mother? You'll do great, Gwen, I said, patting her back. And if anyone gives you trouble, just remember, always keep a backup of your data. Hudson walked up to the car, looking handsome but uncharacteristically somber. Jenny, your driver is ready. I turned to him, offering a gentle, polite smile. Thank you, Hudson, for everything. Are we going to try to make this work? Long distance, he asked, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. I looked at him, feeling a fleeting moment of pity. Hudson was a good man, but he was bound by a world of expectations, family obligations, and wealth that he hadn't earned. I, on the other hand, had just earned my freedom. Hudson, I said softly, reaching up to gently touch his cheek. You are a wonderful man, but my future is in California, and your future is here, running your father's empire. Let's leave things as they are, a beautiful chapter. He looked at me for a long moment, realizing that no amount of money could buy my presence anymore. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining. I understand. I wish you the best, Jenny. Goodbye, Hudson. I got into the back seat of the SUV. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I took out my phone and opened my banking app. Account balance, $1,230,000. I leaned back against the leather seat, watching the university buildings fade into the distance. Cute was indeed a consolation prize. But independence? Independence was the real prize.